evening, cult members. Cry. Welcome to the Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And welcome to our breakdown reaction. There's going to be lots of crying. And review of episode called The Spies. This is episode chapter 24 of The Mandalorian. Chapter 23 of The Mandalorian. So close. Episode 7, season 3, whatever. It's, I have all kinds of things. Let's start with Star Wars Celebration. I know. They showed this episode on Saturday.
Yeah. Was it Saturday? Friday?
Friday. And nobody in that room leaked what happened to this.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want the mouse coming to your house.
Oh yeah, no. Mouse coming Praetorian guard Praetorian guard. Yo ass. I saw one thing about the Skype call that somebody should have been there that wasn't. And that was from the 8 minutes they showed during the Mando panel. But I saw nothing of the people who actually went to the screening that night.
Okay.
And that is how you can tell that those were real Star Wars fans and not the douchebags on the internet.
Right.
Yep. That's the example I'm using from now on.
Yep.
Okay. Let's start. There's a lot to break down with this episode. We're going to do our best to kind of go through it as quickly as we can. But we might skip some stuff. IG-12 and Grogu with a yes/no button is the best thing I've ever seen.
Somebody watched all those TikToks with the dogs with the buttons things to talk.
Yes. I will not go into depth with that one because I think really ultimately that's a setup for something that happens in the next episode, so we don't need to go in depth. Just it was amazing, and in the end, Zelen going, "No baby, no bad baby, no squeeze." Like
bad baby, no squeeze.
That just okay. Just let's really start with Elia Kane doing her best Decker from Blade Runner 2029. Impersonation. She had the coat. It was popped. It was a neon city. It was
raining.
Coruscant. It was raining.
Does it rain on Coruscant? Have we ever been there when it was raining?
I'm not going to say. I'm going to say yes because the alternative is waste from upper stories coming to the lower levels, and I just don't want to have that thought process.
Right.
And the Imperial probe droid is the thing that greets her.
Okay. Of course it is.
Jesus, there's levels upon levels of what that means. Just the probe droid on Coruscant.
Right.
So they mention it in the
Skype
call. I'm so excited. This is going to be hard. That they have Imperial loyalists on every planet in the galaxy. That's the example. You're on Coruscant.
Yeah.
And there's a probe droid running around.
Right. Well, I don't know how much it is running around, but I mean, we've been to Coruscant when they went to the junkyards, the decommission yards, whatever.
Yeah.
This Imperial stuff is everywhere.
Yeah.
So, to have it deactivated, so to speak, in the corner of some shop or whatever, if people walk by, they're really probably not going to think much about it because this stuff is laying around all over the place.
And they're repurposing a lot of the stuff and destroying a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's just hit and miss on what they are actually keeping. And having a probe droid be a watchdog through the lower levels of Coruscant makes complete sense.
Yeah.
It's just having random things from the Empire around blinds you to what it could be doing.
Right, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying.
Out of sight, out of mind kind of thing.
Well, or just there's so much of it that you don't see it anymore.
Yeah.
Right? it kind of goes back to what I was saying last episode with, I feel like, so I was saying that the amnesty people, were gonna, and they still might, but
Activate or whatever. Yeah.
but all of this stuff sitting around Coruscant is just, it's it something's gonna happen with
Yep,
it.
something's gonna happen.
Because they're
And
not doing, I mean, they're trying to take those ships apart, but it's taking forever.
yeah,
And
yeah, there's
so
thousands of Star Destroyers out there.
yeah,
The it's she's contacting Moff Gideon. We all knew Moff Gideon was freed in the last episode. Some people complained it was off screen. I get why it was off screen. That the impact of that is much more important when you have Carson Teva find him than to actually show the actual process of the escape,
right,
because you want to have that level of intrigue with him finding the Beskar and have
right,
so having that off screen. Yes, the action set piece would have been cool to see, but narratively, story wise, it makes way more sense doing it this way, and
right,
then having this his own Skype call with her, and him learning that the Mandalorian clans are coming back together.
right,
And so, with the idea that only other defined power dynamic in the New Republic right now that is a threat to stopping the Empire are Mandalorians reunited.
right. Because the New Republic,
Yeah.
no, uh, um, they they're too they're too top heavy,
They're,
for lack of a. They're
yeah,
just they're too bureaucratic.
yeah,
They're not going to be a
yeah.
threat.
That's a huge conversation that I'm really glad that they're working through. What happens when the rebels win the war?
Right.
What
Now
happens
what?
now? Now everyone wants to stay at the table, and everybody's going to say, I did XYZ for the rebellion to help us win. My seat at the table should be more important than somebody else's. And that's not what the rebellion was about. It was about everybody coming to the table to defeat this thing. And it's something that's very interesting that they kind of touched on, worked through in the books, this idea of Mon Mothma wants to demilitarize the New Republic down to almost nothing, because she wants to give an open hand of friendship to people, not show up with a fleet of starships and say, I have an open hand, but if you say no, I have these people who are going to force you to do it, which is what the Empire
Right.
did.
And there's, I mean, both ways are wrong.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
There's a happy medium, but yeah, it's just working through the logistics of, you know, now that you've won, what do you do? And you could take um the Revolutionary War,
Yep.
here in the States, all the states were coming together to fight the British, and then they won. And now
Now what?
and now everybody, the same thing. Everybody's fighting for their seat at the table. Everybody wants representation. Everybody wants their way of life to be the norm for the country,
Yep.
and then we end up with a civil war.
Yep. 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 And I just love that that's kind of the conversation that we're having. When he realizes it's the Mandalorians, he goes, he gets in, keep doing your thing, Kang. You're being creepy and weird, and Decker. And he goes in the most elaborate entrance ever, going
Right?
through all the screen.
What's the point of all those?
It's just cool. And he's all about style.
It's
He is
true.
all about style.
It's true.
But he goes to this Skype call. There are several different Imperial warlords, but the two I'm going to identify is Bernadal Hux, who is General Hux's father,
Right.
who was actually played by Brian Gleason Domhnall's brother. And
I was gonna
yeah,
ask
yeah,
if he was a Gleason, because he definitely looks like
yeah, he definitely looks
yeah,
like Domhnall. And so that's cool. And they talk about his thing that he's doing, which is Project Necromancer, which isn't necessarily announcing the idea of the Palpatine Snoke claw hand Exegol thing, but it is.
Yeah.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. The other one that's there is Gallard Pelion, who is the Imperial officer who is Thrawn's right hand man in Heir of the Empire, which I am currently listening to as I work out. And he is a very capable Imperial commander who Thrawn is taking a liking to. Now, Heir of the Empire is not canon, but they're bringing a lot of the Heir of the Empire stuff in for this story. And the two of them are pretty much the heads, what it feels like, of this shadow council of Imperial remnants that are all over the country, all over the galaxy.
Right, yeah. They definitely feel like they've got a little more pull than...
And they have a little more pull, they have a little more resources, and Gideon points at that because he wants TIE defenders, bombers, and Praetorian guards.
Yep.
Because when he brings it up that the Mandalorians are regaining some kind of structure, all the Imperials freak out because they know that the Mandalorians together are the only real big threat. In the way the Empire is set up with all these local warlords, they just don't have enough to go against the Mandalorians at full strength, or even 50% strength.
Right. Well, and they do say that they're going back to Mandalore.
Yeah.
Which
we come to find out later is where Gideon's base is.
Right. I mean, they say this is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
That's too close. This is going to be a problem for us or whatever. But I was thinking they were on one of the moons, not on Mandalore.
Right, on Mandalore, right. And so he gets his way. That's the first 8 minutes. We've spent 12 minutes talking about the first 8 minutes of this episode.
As Katie said, so much. There's so much to go.
So much. The fleet goes to Navarro. We have a really fun exchange between the protocol droid and the Grief Karga, High Magistrate Grief Karga, and he's like, "There's a light cruiser coming in. It's Imperial light cruiser." And he's like, "Look at the markings." And there's this giant mythosaur.
Right. The first thing I said is, how much paint did that take?
I said it was blood of their enemies, but paint. It's paint.
That's a lot of blood too.
But we have the standoff when they land. All the Night Owl, essentially clan, all take their helmet off, and all of the covert, the armor and their covert, all don't, and they have this. We were just missing the tumbleweed going across the standoff. And the armorer is the one who de-escalates it and says, "Hey, let's have a feast. We're all back together." And there's a moment of everybody kind of like, "Okay, all right, whatever." And then at the feast, Bo says, well, "We're going to Mandalore, and we're going to take it back. And this is how we're going to do it. And we need a scouting group of people from both sides to check everything out, to find out where the forge is, and then we can bring everybody else down, and we can set up camp, and we can start the rebuilding process."
Right.
But I need volunteers. I'm not going to point to people. I need volunteers from both clans. And Din stands up and then says, and Grogu's going, and Grogu's like, "I get to take my mech?" And he stands up, and he's eating again, whatever.
He's a growing child.
He's a growing child. And then we get the so will I, so will I, so will I, so will I, all the way through. Paz is in there. Where's the name? Axe Wolves is in there. Koska Reeves is in there. Like, everybody's in there. There's a couple of red shirts from the covert group. But it's a very kind of call to arms fun, which is capped off with the armorer saying, "I will go too." Red flag number 1. Get to the other one in a minute.
Yeah.
There's definitely a sense of we don't trust each other, uh, but we're on the same path together right now.
Yeah.
And so if we're on the same path together right now, the trust will come.
Right. It's more of mom says we have to
Yeah, yeah,
on both
yeah,
sides.
yeah, a little bit, yeah.
You know. So, but yeah, as they fight together, work together, whatever, then yeah, the trust will come.
The trust will come. Um, like I said, we're gonna skip a bunch of stuff. We get to Mandalore with the fleet. The fleet stays out. The scouting group with the gauntlet goes down. There's a little bit of an exchange between Axe and Paz about um, it's worse than Paz says it was worse than I thought, and Axe was like I was here when it happened.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of a moment where they kind of it's not really a big exchange, but they both take a moment to look at each other like understanding. Maybe not necessarily a coming together at that point in time, but there's definitely an understanding of the other one's feelings.
Well, yeah, and they for all they can see is their differences, right?
Yeah,
One keeps their helmets on, one doesn't. All of that. That's all they could see, and then they have a shared uh, grief. A
yeah,
shared
yeah,
moment with the fact that their home planet was destroyed, and whether they were on it at the time or not, still their home planet.
yeah.
And so it was kind of a, oh yeah, we do have something in common
It
as
was, and that
well.
was the first one. Paz's story arc over this 3 seasons, but specifically this season, has been so refreshing, and I will get into deeper what that meaning is for me in a minute. But the idea that he's coming around to the idea that there's other ways of viewing the world outside of what he's had in this little covert with the armor, and
Yeah.
so it was just it was a very subtle thing that I picked up on the first viewing, but especially the second viewing, where they both kind of looked at each other like, okay, we same page. At
Yeah.
least for the right now, we're on the same page,
Yeah.
because then they have a fight later while
Yeah.
they're playing chess,
Yeah.
Mandalorian chess,
Yeah.
and they are bickering about their differences again. And so
Yeah.
when they have that fight there, Axe, put your helmet on. And stop punching him in the face with a freaking just a glove on, like the
Right. He
like,
has a Veskar helmet on.
and
You're not going to do
it's not
anything.
wise. But there's an example of they're not quite there yet, and then Mech Grogu breaks it up, and they make a point of saying,
No.
no,
No.
yeah,
No. No.
yeah, but they made a point of saying, Dan said, "Should I break it up?" And Bo's like, "No, this is gonna have. It had to happen at some point in time, and one of us, and neither side can break it up.
Right.
There has to be. They have to work it out.
Right.
And this is my example is remember the Titans when they integrate the black school and they bring a black players and the black coach in. They have to have the fight on the field at some point in time. It's going to boil over. It's going to happen.
Right.
They have the fight in the field, and then the coach sits down and says, "Okay, do you feel better?
Right.
Like, you got it out. You're done. You've got, now we have to work together, or we're all just going to be sitting on the sidelines when the playoffs happen."
Yeah.
And that's what this is.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
It's they have to have this fight, and the person who breaks it up is Grogu.
Right.
And Bo's like, "You've taught your apprentice well." That wasn't from me. That was from Luke. Luke's the
Yeah.
one who taught him that
Yeah.
violence is not the way.
Yeah.
Even though Grogu has been brought up in this Mandalorian violent nature and stuff like that, this is not getting anything done.
Right.
And it's great that it comes from Grogu and nobody else,
Yeah.
because he is the outsider of the group, even if he is part of the covert.
Right.
We find the Black Pearl.
Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute. There's people on Mandalore?
Right.
Like, and how horrible that they've been, 20 years?
Yeah. 10 at the least. I'm trying to do the math in my head when it happened, but yeah.
They're just wind sailing around on the glass surface, waiting for somebody
And I
to
love their
come
first
back.
question is, "Do you have food?"
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're in bad shape.
Yeah. No, they are. Yeah.
But um, but it's also refreshing that people have the Mandalorians who stayed adapted to a new way of life,
Mhm.
which is an example that maybe the covert needs to learn, and maybe the night owls need to learn that they've had to adapt to survive.
Yeah, and Puz says, it's worse than I expected,
Yeah,
right? So they're expecting they left Navarro where, they were in tents kind of in the desert, whatever, but it wasn't horrible, but this is you're not going to just uh like cities where nobody lives anymore. Like it's not great here. And
it's full on Mad Max. Like
yeah,
it is
and
full on
so,
Mad Max.
you're going to have to figure that out,
Yeah,
like how you rebuild.
yeah, yeah. And that's I think it's a nice to have a third interpretation of what it means to be Mandalorian, because once they realize that it's Lady Bo-Katan Kryze, the
Yeah.
leader of the Mandalorians,
Yeah.
of the royal bloodline,
Yeah.
they like instantly came down and bowed,
Yeah.
bent the knee. That's the
Yeah.
word. They bent. They
Yeah, cuz they
instantly.
haven't been involved in all
Yeah,
this stuff that's been going
yeah,
on out in the universe. They've been The last thing they remember is, when she was part of the royal family and the royal family was there on the planet. So they don't know like all this other stuff that's happened
yeah,
since
yeah,
then.
yeah, and how and the dinner that they have on the barge. Um, they kind of start talking about the purge and how everything happened, and that and the people who stayed believe that uh the empire it eradicated everybody to prove that nobody should step up against them. And then Bo said, "No, you're wrong. I did submit. I did surrender. I did give up the dark saber to save our people. That was the only way to do it. And then he turned on us and
Right.
went ahead and destroyed us anyways."
Yeah.
And when she first said it, like everybody got angry, which is the obvious response.
Yeah.
They got angry, but when she explained what she was trying to do,
Yeah.
that she did care, and that the stories that the armorer, red flag number two, has been telling everybody that she was selfish, and that she gave up Mandalore to be because she was selfish, um, was that's not entirely true.
Right.
Bo was selfish. Bo was selfish when she joined Death Watch to fight against her sister, who was trying to make Mandalore better.
Right. But that was all before.
Long time ago.
Yeah. So before any of that happened, and she maybe was trying to make up for that,
Yeah, yeah.
but she said, she knew that it was a bad idea, but it was the
It was
only
the
idea.
only one. It was the only option she had.
Yeah, like maybe there's a sliver that it will actually work,
Yeah,
and it didn't.
yeah, yeah.
Surprise.
And they asked the survivors asked the covert armor specifically, "How did you all survive?" And she's like, "We're on Concordia."
Yeah, we weren't
With
even
Death
here.
Watch, and he's like, "You were Death Watch," and like Death Watch, and she said Death Watch broke up into several warring clans, and now we're spread out across the.
She said Death Watch doesn't exist
Doesn't
anymore.
exist anymore. We
Yeah,
we fought amongst each other and separated and stuff like that.
yeah,
So another example of how the Empire, even if they weren't on Mandalore, the Empire pushing them all apart from each other to that we're stronger together. What's the last line? What's the most important line of Rise of Skywalker? There's more of us, Poe. There's more of us. And if and that's the same exact story that they're telling with the Mandalorians.
yeah.
There's more of us, and we're better. We're stronger together.
Right.
And there's this idea that now we have different factions of the Mandalorians coming together. Uh, is a I love that peace dinner. I just love that peace dinner and just the importance of it. But it also weighs heavily on Bo, because she does understand that she was selfish for joining Death Watch, and that she she doesn't know if she can hold it together because she's holding it together with an inanimate object.
Yeah.
And Din coming to her and saying, "I that everything I've learned about that sword is from you, and everything that you've told me about everything I've known about what it means to be Mandalorian is honor based, being true to your word, all that stuff, and that's everything that you are." And he calls her Lady Kreese.
Yeah.
He calls her by the royal name.
Yeah.
And then bends the knee. He's now Jorah Mormont. I'm gonna make all the Game of Thrones references tonight. But it's just, I love that we're having this moment where there are people who understand that we need to all come together to retake Mandalore. But it's not just about retaking Mandalore. It's about retaking our people, retaking our culture.
Yeah. Well, it's called The Mandalorian.
Right.
And John, I think it was John, I don't think it was Dave, came out, I think at Celebration, and said, Din is no longer like
the Mandalorian.
He is not the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Figure out which one it is, or is it all of them?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that they had that kind of moment of clarity at Celebration where they're like, it's about being Mandalorian. It's not about one particular Mandalorian.
Right.
Because if we were going to do
story
that,
started there.
we would have done Boba.
Yeah.
And I can't wait till he shows up and have another view of what it means to be Mandalorian.
Yeah. Because
he is a son of a foundling who has made his own way in the galaxy. So it's just another version of what it means to be Mandalorian and having him show up. And it's so I could go on for hours about just the barge scene, but not the most important. The other part of that is the armorer saying, Bo's like, okay,
we need to go find the
furnace.
furnace. The furnace.
It's not the furnace. Is it the furnace?
The big fiery thingy that they make armor out of.
Anyways, they have to go find that. I'll get it in a minute. And the armorer's like, yes, but these people are too weak to continue.
Yeah.
We'll go back to the gauntlet in the morning. You guys can go to the furnace. And I'll take them back to the fleet where they can give them a better.
They can take care of them.
They can take care of them.
Yeah.
Red flag number 3.
I don't trust her.
I was coming around on her, and it's now I have all kinds of questions. They get attacked by a monster on the barge. After the gauntlet goes, I love Bo watching the gauntlet leave. Like it's just her back, but if it was her face, it would have been like, is that a good idea?
Yeah. I just gave her
that
my
was a ride.
Ship. We can't communicate.
Yeah. The barge gets attacked by a monster. They go underground. They find
the forge,
the Great Forge. I just popped in my head.
It starts with an F.
The Great Forge, and they have another moment where Axe is like, I was here. Axe and Casca are both like, we were here. We lived here. We were part of this. And there's a moment between them and pause and kind of a moment of whatever, and then they hear jetpacks. And now we come to find out that the pieces of armor in the over elaborate entrance that Moff Gideon had are his own personal stormtrooper Beskar armor warriors.
Right. Yes.
There's people in them.
Right.
And
there's people in the Mandalorian
right,
armor.
but he makes a point of saying Dark Troopers later on. And so I'm wondering if some people are like, well, they weren't Dark Troopers, they were white. No, they feel much more like the Saxon Imperial armor setup in Rebels. They're all white with red markings. They have the Imperial symbol on their shoulders, if I remember correctly. It's an outward symbol of those Mandalorians are working for the Empire. It's the Saxon clan that does it.
And now we know where the Beskar that was lodged in the ship that they broke him out of
was from. That makes complete sense. And then we have a really cool fight scene over and over and over, blah, 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 like just all this different things and
Yep.
going on,
Yep.
and Axe leaves. Axe goes to try to get help. Paz covers him, so they are definitely now much more coherent with each other.
Yes. Although I don't know how Axe is going to get help
I
because there's no ship and
don't,
you can't communicate with the fleet.
and he's not flying out of atmosphere in his jetpack.
I mean, yeah.
But
I mean, I guess he could, but probably doesn't have enough fuel to.
yeah, and they pointed that out in the dinosaur episode,
Right.
where
He would
Ragnar
Tony
was
Stark. He would like get to a certain height and then run out of fuel.
yeah,
and
and now he's
sputter
proper
back
screwed.
down
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
to Earth.
But ultimately, the Imperial Mandalorians fall back and cause a trap for the night covert angels, owls of Mandalore.
It's getting very
Um,
confusing.
and they are all trapped with Din and a couple of red shirts on the outside, and they get overpowered. And Din takes a couple of down, but then he gets overpowered. And then Moff Gideon shows up in full black Beskar armor with knee darts.
He's channeling his inner Darth Maul, Darth Vader.
Yes, yes, very much so. I've been saying since the beginning when they introduced Moff Gideon that he wants to be Vader. Long cape, the breastplate, it all kind of come across that way.
But his helmet's very Maul.
But his helmet is very Maul. Now, there's been some discussion. I'm like trying to leave a slimmer of hope that the armor is actually good. But it's not. It's not very big. It's not very big at all. Uh, his helmet looks more like a crown with the 6 points, 6 crenellated points,
Okay.
much more than horns.
Okay.
So that's the only like where I'm trying to make the differentiation between the two. If she was actually Death Watch worked for Maul. I can make that step, and she just kept that helmet because you don't take your helmet off, and so if you take your helmet off, you to put on a new one as your apostate and whatever. But his is much more of a
Just don't let anybody see your face.
just don't let, whatever. But his is much more of a crown. In my eye, as we sit right now, it's much more of a crown.
All right.
But him, like, pretty much just waving his superiority over Bo and everybody.
Oh yeah, he's loving it.
He's
loving it.
And he calls for the final purge of the Mandalorians when he calls for the TIE interceptors, TIE defenders, to attack the fleet.
Right.
They come to find out that Moff Gideon's base is on Mandalore, which we talked about earlier. But there's a lot more there than I think any of us would really have thought. He's been building for quite a while in this spot, and he's been in prison for some of it.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody on that Skype call seemed to be aware of. So I feel like it hasn't just been him working on it. I think it's been a collaborative effort to come up with some sort of base that's out of, the Republic's eye.
Yeah.
And work on this stuff.
Yeah. It's definitely some shady backroom dealing kind of thing. But I'm interested in them explaining that at some point in time. How that all built.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't. Whatever. But the big thing that he says in that is, every culture has something to give. The clones, the Jedi, and the Mandalorians.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to be a betting man, and he makes a comment about the Dark Troopers, the one weakness has now been solved. I'm in the Dark Troopers armor. And they talk about it in the Skype call that the cloning, the Pershing was doing, the cloning research that Pershing was doing is lost for now. If I were to put some red string out in different directions about what they try to do with Grogu, what they've done with the cloning, what they've done with the Beskar, what they've done all these different directions, my interpretation of all of that is that Moff Gideon is trying to build a Force-sensitive clone army armored by Beskar.
Yeah.
which would then be the most powerful fighting unit in the galaxy and impossible to beat. They could be a very small, quote unquote, small unit and still reign the day. And if that is his ultimate goal, you're screwed if he's successful.
Unless everybody comes together,
Right.
right? Unless Mandalorians and the Jedi's, which there's only a handful
There's only a handful floating around.
masters. There are, I mean, we have the trail,
The path.
the path.
The path.
So they are trying
There
to.
are the path is before, but there are force sensitive people through that process.
Right.
Right.
So I mean, they are out there, but they're not masters. They're not necessarily trained in the
From
ways.
my top of my head, as we sit right now, this is what 7 years after Gavin. The force users that are in the galaxy that are known are Luke and Ahsoka.
Right.
Now, Cal might be running around, Quinlan Voss might be running around, but of the known Jedi, there's 2.
Right.
And if you watch the Ahsoka trailer,
Well, Obi-Wan's out there.
Obi-Wan's dead. It's 7 years after Yavin, not before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was.
Yes. Going the other
yes.
way. Yeah.
Obi-Wan is dead.
Yeah. So as we sit right now, there's only 2 known Force users.
Right.
3, but nobody really knows that Leia's Force sensitive.
Right.
And so, and at this point in time, she's not quite. It's not quite out in the open that she is Vader's daughter. So we're not quite to that point. That could happen in Ahsoka, but yeah. So there's that conversation has to be had. But if Gideon's trying to build this ultimate weapon army, it just he could take out everybody, including Thrawn, because he was calling out Thrawn in the Skype call.
Yeah.
And which is dumb. But whatever.
I think that might be his downfall.
It's probably going to be his downfall. But the Thrawn of it all, interesting if he shows up next week. Bose pretty much tells Gideon to suck it, and she takes the Darksaber. He even calls it out. Give me the Darksaber. Oh yeah, I have this thing. And she goes and cuts a hole in the door. Why did we not start there? And they escape through the hole, and then Paz stays behind and covers the retreat. And he uses his gun so much that he melts it.
Yeah.
And then he single-handedly, without a weapon, takes out the rest of the Imperial. What did we decide they were called? Imperial
Death Troopers.
Imperial Mandalorian bad guys. It's very nice of them to wear white too, so they're
Storm,
very
Imperial, Beskar, bad guys.
And then the Praetorian guards show up and pretty much just wreck him.
Yep.
Showing you how good they are and how badass Kylo and Rey are with what they did. And that's how the episode ends. Is the smoking body of Paz.
You had a youngling to take care of.
His arc, I wanted to bring this up a little bit. His arc of protector for the armorer to survivor of the attack of Navarro to the right-hand man of the armorer to I'm questioning the things that I have been taught, and I'm starting to view the world in a different lens, and the idea that he was allowing himself to do that ultimate sacrifice of defending those who were from different clans with different views of the world is amazing.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like it might be, and they may never discuss this, and it's fine, but I kind of feel like it's a little bit, it goes back to the conversation that him and Axe had, where Axe was like, well, I was there. Is he feeling a little guilt for not being there to help defend the planet, and so this is his way of contributing now.
Yeah, yeah. I I just his arc has been one of the ones where I've been like, I really don't trust the armorer, but I didn't trust him mostly out of just he was just following a man that follows orders.
Yeah, he was kind of a meathead.
Uh, a- yeah,
He's
yeah.
just a big.
It came
a big
across as a meathead who actually had a much more deeper
Yeah,
thoughts.
he's like, well, the dark saber should belong to my family, and
Right. Yeah.
but then he was. I mean, he's just been a jerk to Din since the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then he was one of the first ones out of the sewers, to help him.
Save Grogu. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
conflicted the whole way.
I just such a good arc and spoilers for the Bad Batch. If you're watching this at this point in time, 40 minutes in, you've watched the Bad Batch. The sacrifice that was done in that episode is parallel to Paz's
Yeah.
sacrifice. His journey was a lot different. He was part of the sacrifice in Bad Batch. That character's story was about him saving his family.
Yeah.
And he was always part of this family. And so his arc is very different, but it's a very parallel reason as Paz's reason.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really good. The armorer is a big meanie liar.
Shocking.
I really hope that it's because she gets back, she sees the fleet, the Tide Defenders, Interceptors. I cannot remember which ones they were. Showing up and
comes back and gets them.
And comes back and gets them. But that the element of surprise that they had is not actually an element of surprise. But I really want that to happen because I really think that she also has had this arc of
right
of they've
coming,
at least
coming
presented it.
Yeah.
That there's an arc of acceptance there.
But she still keeps doing things that you're like, I don't trust you.
I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I don't trust you. And Gideon saying, my currency is intelligence and information and stuff like that. So it feels like that's the point where it makes the most sense that she is working for Gideon for whatever reason, that she's been promised something or whatever. But I just.
But he would have known that they were getting back together, and he wouldn't have had to have had.
And that's a good point. I haven't really thought of it that way.
Yeah,
she would have told him that they're getting back together.
Yeah, unless
and going
she
back
hadn't
to Mandalorian.
had the opportunity to or something.
Yeah, but it feels very icky.
I don't feel like she's working for Gideon. I feel like she's working for herself.
Yeah. And I've been thinking that specifically for quite a while. It seemed very convenient that she sent Din off to go to the Living Waters because she had the Living Waters to make the armor.
Right.
Like, so there's just different things there where I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
We have one episode left, and then there'll be a break until Ahsoka in August. But with the I have no idea. I have one idea. I'm going to rephrase that. I have one idea. This is now about Grogu saving Din instead of Din going to save Grogu. And that Grogu is going to have the help of Bo and Casca and everybody. And that they are all going to go save Din, and then the armorer is going to help save the fleet.
They have to go save him.
They have to go save Din.
Yeah.
And Din's going to lose his helmet. They're going to take his helmet off.
Yeah.
I think that's the other.
Well, at
thing.
least he's on the planet. He can go bathe in the water.
Yeah,
again.
it's right down the street.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's. But other than that, I have no idea. There's a possibility Thrawn shows up in the next episode. I think the last little bit of the episode could be like
him showing up and calling out Gideon for calling him out that he wasn't at all the Zoom calls.
And then something along the line of Sabine and or Ahsoka showing up, and after everybody gets back together, whatever the remnants of what gets back together, and like, hey, we heard you had a run in with Imperial Warlord. We're looking for this, and they're kind of sets up Ahsoka. But but that's just projecting. The big thing is they're going to go save Din.
Yeah,
I think that's what the big part of that episode is going to be next week. So,
or they'll leave it.
let us know what you thought after 45 minutes. It was a long episode, and we didn't cover everything. It's so good. Thank you for watching this and liking this video. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and follow us on all the social media stuff: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links in the description down below. Please be nice. And until next time, cult members, good afternoon, good evening, and good night now.